and welcome to the Courtney Turner Podcast. Today's guest is Hrvoje Morić. I think I got his name right. I asked him right before. I was like, I'm sure I'm going to butcher this, but hopefully I got it. And he is the host of Geopolitics and Empire. I can't believe we actually haven't had him on. I was thinking about that, and it felt like we had because I had been on his show, I think when it was back in TNT a few years ago, and we recently did a podcast together, and we've had lots of little chats and stuff, so I can't believe that, you know, in my mind, he had already been on. But so this will be a treat for the audience, I think. He has been in this game for quite a long time. He is a wealth of knowledge. He also recently started, I believe they call it the Cognitive Dissonance, with my friend Monica and Parallel Mike. And the name is so funny to me because I had the Cognitive Liberty Conference. And of course, you know, with Ryan Christian, I do the Dialectical Dissonance show. So it's like a hybrid, and they do great work there as well. So let's bring him on. Hrvoje, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. What's happening? You know. One of our we were thinking of names. One of them was No Silo, and it's funny because I just finished watching Tim Robbins' Silo Dystopia series, and now I'm thinking No Silo would have been cool because we don't like to have ideological silos, right?
Right.
And then we were just up against the wall, and we're like, okay, we'll go with cognitive dissonance. But yeah.
I love it. I think it's great. Yeah. So let's let's do a little background because I don't know if everybody knows your history, and you actually have a really interesting history. How did you get into this game? You've been doing this for quite a long time. Like, I'm pretty new to all of this, but you're kind of OG. So
yeah, you mean my history with the podcasting space, or?
Yeah. Well, and before that too, because yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Before that, I was just going to say your appearance on Geopolitics and Empire was a very popular episode. People were very impressed, and I was impressed with just how much info you synthesized to the small space. But yeah, I'm originally born in Chicago, so I'm an American, but my parents are immigrants from Croatia, and I actually identify first as a Croatian. I'm fluent in Croatian and have Croatian citizenship, and we moved back and forth when I was a kid. They kept trying to return to the homeland. Mm-hmm. And so basically I did my undergrad studies of history and education in Illinois. And then after that, I wanted to leave the American Empire and to permanently expatriate. And so in 2006, my ticket out was Peace Corps. So I did Peace Corps in Mongolia, became intermediate in Mongolian, lived in the yurt in the Gobi Desert, became one with the Mongols. And after that, I was listless, came back briefly to the U.S.
Right? Isn't that what they say? The Shambhala is above the Gobi Desert.
I suppose I'm not as familiar, but yeah, very shamanistic Buddhist. Although it's 90% shamanistic Buddhist, the country, maybe 90% plus. It's the lowest country with the lowest population density on the planet. But there was, I kid you not, because I'm a Christian, I found there was a Baptist church in my village in the middle of nowhere. Well, what are the chances? Which I attended. But yeah, I was listless. I came back to the U.S. briefly. I was listless. Like, what am I going to do? And then I decided to get a master's of international relations in Geneva at the Geneva School of Diplomacy. That's really my forte, geopolitics, international relations. And so some of my professors were Curtis Dobler, who's a Dutch-American international lawyer who was Saddam Hussein's defense counsel. Alfred de Zayas, I've interviewed him on my podcast. He's a senior retired UN lawyer, special reporter. He's been on RT frequently, and he's the great grandson of Cuba's president before Batista. And so even Yasser Arafat's brother-in-law was my professor, Ibrahim Sous. And so, you know, that was the ambient I was around. I was a staff assistant at the 2009 World Health Assembly, when they ran the fake swine flu thing, you know, the first
simulation, yeah.
The beta test of, and I was thinking about this the other day. You notice how they come with economic crisis, 2008-9 global financial crisis, pandemic simulation. Yes. 2019 financial crisis, pandemic simulation. But yeah, and then after that, I was going to look for jobs anywhere in the world. I just loved traveling the world. I was looking at jobs, Mongolia, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Alaska, and I got an offer to teach in Mexico. In 2010, they flew me out, and it's the top school where the Mexican millionaires send their kids. It's called Tec de Monterrey. So I taught high school and university there for 7 years. And it's the only university that attends in all of Latin America that attends Davos World Economic Forum. So they have a link. Then I got a job 2017 to 2021 to teach in Kazakhstan, where I was there for 3 years. And I met Gorbachev along the way. Went to Russia for 3 weeks with a peace diplomacy group, and then TNT Radio. And here we are, just doing the podcast full time now. And
Wow.
I became a Mexican national as well along the way. So I got 3 passports.
Yeah, a few. Yeah. So how many do you have?
What?
How many passports?
I actually got them here because I'm doing some travel stuff. So
Okay.
Croatia, USA, Mexico.
Wow.
International man.
For sure. So what made you start the podcast?
Right. So when I came to the tech in Mexico, 2010, I think a lot of us are on the same frequency. Yourself, myself, a lot of our peers in the alt media space, and we just want to know what's going on. Right. We're seeking something higher. And I've always been like that, and I kind of get disgusted with mediocrity, right? And I'm teaching history, international relations, and in most workplaces, I think many people can attest to this. Most people are mediocre. They just clock in, clock out, 9 to 5. You'll have a small portion that are the higher, the people just looking for to do more. And I try to talk to my colleagues. You guys are history teacher, politics people, and no one's interested in these things that we discuss on our podcast, like geopolitics, deep politics, parapolitics. And I just got frustrated. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I started Skyping in experts into my classroom on the YouTube channel in 2012. It's still up. It's called Dissident Thinker. There's the word dissident again,
Yeah.
Dissident Thinker. And it's linked to you can find the link on my Geopolitics and Empire channel. There's still the link there to that old channel. And I was interviewing John Perkins, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman, Paul Craig Roberts, Ray McGovern, former CIA, James Bamford, Lord Christopher Monckton, people like that. Robert Pastor. I think I had the last living interview of the father of the North American Union, Robert Pastor, in December 2013. He passed in January 2014 from cancer. And so that's basically how it started. I just wanted to connect with intellectuals to have discussion. And then by 2015, I think I'm like, why don't I just formalize this into a podcast? And so it became Geopolitics and Empire. So 10 plus years now.
Wow, that's amazing. What would you say has been the biggest highlight and learning lesson of doing the podcast?
I mean, a number of things. I'd like to say I'm humble, but I like to, we all need to sometimes look at some of our achievements and look back. And I kind of pride myself that, well, first, I've been able to talk to so many people. With TNT, it's close to 2,000, I think, interviews, 1,500 plus. And the fact that I created this body of work, moonlighting, it's just a hobby, right? It's just a passion. I was teaching full time and literally like moonlight hours, everyone's asleep and I'm editing my podcast and publishing and then have to go to work in the morning again. I'm not getting paid for it. But I built out this body of work. And then, when TNT came around, they offered me a full-time salary to do a radio program based on all of this work that I had done for free for almost a decade. And then, now being able to do the podcast and get paid for it, it's kind of like, I think it's kind of cool where I'm able to work for myself for now. It's not a sure thing. Take it month by month. But I'm like, I manifest, I don't like the occult meaning of manifesting, but I mean like I'm just able to manifest through my work, through my intellect, a job for myself, a career, something I love doing, and just out of nothing to create a job for myself and get paid for it. Where most people, it's difficult to do that. Most people look to be employed by someone, and for me, it's kind of an achievement that I can just do this, and as you say, to have had some success with my hobby, and to have met many of my intellectual heroes that I was reading through the 2000s before I started the podcast. I've met Ron Paul in person. G. Edward Griffin took me out to lunch. That's a story in 2011. Many
He's
of my
amazing. I've met him not too long ago, and he's in his 90s, and he's sharp as a tack, and he's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and to have the virtual conversations with all, Daniela Ganser, the Swiss historian on Operation Gladio, William Engdahl. I mean, you name it. All the folks that I've had on my podcast. Like, I feel like I've reached the top of the mountain. Like I've met all these people that I've loved and read their books, and then either in person or physically, digitally, virtually, and I'm like, wow. Now I gotta go find a new mountaintop. The new mountaintop is to successfully monetize my podcast, so I can keep going. That's my second, mountain to climb. But yeah,
Yeah, I find that's always really difficult. Is like to beat yourself, right? Like when you actually achieve a goal. I remember, I mean, this was so long ago, but in high school, I had published. My high school actually published it. It was basically a dissertation. Like I first semester did a review of the literature, and then second semester it was field study. It was on dreams. It was on problem solving in dreams. But I was the first junior to ever do this, and I passed with triple distinction. It was, kind of a big deal. And then, so the next year, but I wasn't allowed to drop classes to do field study because I needed the credits, right? I actually ended up graduating, with more credits than I needed. But at the time, I needed the credits, or they thought I would need the credits, so I wasn't, given that permission. But I did get 10 days off to go out to San Francisco and meet with my mentor. All this to say that the next year, I continued this study. I did a different variation of it. I continued the research, so it wasn't exactly the same focus, but it was still on dream analysis. And it was so daunting. It was like, okay, I have to top that. Like that was like such a dream. I had come up with the concept when I was basically, it was the summer going into my sophomore year. So I was a freshman in high school, and I was like, oh, I want to do this research project, So it was a very like pie in the sky kind of thing. And then I was like, oh, I have to beat this again. This is one example of it. I've had like many of those in my life. And it's like, I think that's more daunting than like something just out there. But like knowing that you've surprised yourself and beat yourself at something, like you've done something you didn't think you could do. And then to, then top that, which is, that's
I think ideally, that's who we should. I have this philosophy where I don't view my peers like the Courtney Turner podcast or whoever, Corbett or something as competition. I have like a win-win. We should have a win. We should all be working together to help each other out. And you should, in a lot of these business productivity books, they say you should be competing against yourself. Kind of like what you just explained, trying to one up yourself and not competing with people in your field. I mean, we're working together. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you feel like in throughout since you've been kind of studying this geopolitical space for a really long time, do you feel like what we're seeing right now in the landscape is kind of what you would have expected with all the research you've done over the years, or are you kind of surprised, or is there, where do you think that we are heading geopolitically?
I always like to say, because I think a lot of us, yourself probably included, that lately nothing really surprises us anymore. So I would say I'm not surprised, but I'm shocked. So I feel like this road that we've been on the past decades, it's not surprising at all, but it's shocking how fast it's all come to be. Like if you think many of us, listeners, we've been going down the rabbit hole, conspiracy research. You hear about this new world order and this totalitarian world state, and they're going to put in all these controls and everything. And it's like, you're reading about this in the 2000s, at least myself, that's where I was at. And you're thinking, okay, maybe when I'm older, 20, 30, 40, and it's like, boom, 2000 teens, you get your 9/11, you get your global financial crisis, you get Trump, you get COVID 9/11, now we're on to the next, you get these wars, Ukraine, cyber polygon, digital controls coming in. And it's like, I'm getting debanked, and it's kind of like, all right, so my sort of analysis is guided by the Bible first, and prophecy. And I feel like, honestly, it hasn't let me down at all. Because I like to say I reverse engineer. We know the end game, whether you look at it from this metaphysical, spiritual, biblical perspective, or then the secular, if you will, scientific, geopolitical perspective, and they match. We got all the white papers by the globalists going back a century talking about a world state. that's totalitarian. Jacques Attali and many others in their own writings talk about depopulation, technocratic world state. And so it's like you just reverse engineer the path of the potential avenues, how they're going to take us there. And yeah, we're tracking it. It's not a surprise at all. I feel like we're just alongside tracking where they're taking us. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I would do that if I was an evil genius like you. Yeah. And it's working. But it's shocking. It's shocking to have known the path and then to actually see it being realized and us being pushed along that path and then beginning to feel the tyranny. I was taken off of Patreon and I can't use PayPal. And another story, I couldn't renew my bank debit card last year here in Mexico. It's still not renewed because they only will now accept as ID the national digital ID in Mexico, which is your Mexican voter ID card, which I never took out. And so now because I can go and apply, get the document, but I don't want to. And so, the walls are beginning to close in. So.
Wow. Well, firstly, I'll just say, yeah, it's kind of funny because, I feel like when I first kind of started the podcast and I was, I always make the joke that it took me a really long time to find the train station. And then I found the high speed rail and I'm still trying to catch up. So, I feel like I was very late to the party, but it was always like all the Christians who were, very, very awake. And they're like, yeah, because we read the book, and I've talked to my mom, I'm like, you really can't deny it's kind of playing out, like whether or not they're using it as a blueprint or whether it's like it's the prophecy, either way, like it's playing out. So I think that's a really, I always kind of remind people of that it's even for people who don't subscribe to it, you have to understand that there are people who really do, and they're very intent on manifesting that for political reasons, not for religious reasons. They're using it, for like imminentization of the eschaton. They're trying to bring about the end times to serve their purpose, not so much not because they believe that that's right.
My view though is very biblical on this, where I believe that God knows the future. He knows everything, and so it's not that they're not using this. It'd be very hard to make if you were using the Bible as your guidebook to carry these things out. There are so many things that would be impossible. I interviewed recently a guy called Britt Gillette, and he makes a point. Like there are prophecies that prophesy to the that are so exact you cannot plant them. Like Jesus's birth, in Bethlehem and at a certain time, and these things were prophesied. So I think no one but God can arrange for them some of them to happen, but some of the other prophecies are not God arranging for them to happen, but Satan and his minions. Yeah. And I think the point is they were going to do this of their own accord anyways, right? Satan and the globalists. The globalists are just Satan's foot soldiers, the Rockefellers, all these different groups. Right. And God's like, oh, I can see ahead. This is what they're going to do. I'm letting you know ahead of time. So that's sort of my view. It's a supernatural thing, the prophecy. So it's not that they're following the book. Even if the Bible we weren't privy to it, they would be seeing the same thing being carried out. So it's just God sort of giving us an alert ahead of time. Well, this was going to happen, So.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. But I'm just saying that there are people who don't believe it, but are using it because they think it'll serve their ends, and I think with what were you going to say?
Yeah. Well, to your point, they're twisting it. So you get like people talk about Darby and Schofield, and so these things are happening anyway. So now what they do is come in, they try to twist the Bible to then support the things that they're trying to carry out, to convince people, believers and non-believers of certain things to get on board, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I call it kind of like the technological immunization of the eschaton, which is kind of what I feel like we're watching unfold. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I just interviewed a fantastic guy, Justino Carero, who's Portuguese Orthodox Christian, and he talks a lot about. I have to read his books now. Carl Schmitt, who was, I think, initially was a Nazi, but then he left the party. But he, again, I think even whatever grouping someone is in, you have to read for their intellect and their insights and disassociate sort of. But something he said that Carl Schmitt was saying, that the technological realm, like you had first, he was talking about nation states and economic systems and political systems,
Mhm.
but that when technology comes in, that's going to be the, like we won't be able to, um, it's going to be like the final boss in the game, technology. That's going to control. Yeah, that. I can't summarize really what he said. It's in there, but basically, he's saying that Carl Schmitt and others have said it's like the final revolution, kind of like what Aldous Huxley was talking about, where technology is the ultimate end game. It's going to take over everything, and you won't be able to sort of. And then I think we're seeing that. It's without technology. I mean, you think I talked about this recently with a guest where human history was pretty static for thousands of years until you hit like the 17, 18, 1900s with the Industrial Revolution. I know you with the second and third, and I know you say we're on the fifth or sixth Industrial Revolution, but without that technology,
So-called experts claim we're in the fifth, and they've outlined the sixth and the seventh. But yes, technically, the more public facing is that the fourth, certainly. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and this world state, this sort of end game would not have been possible without the technology. Now they're creating digital IDs in every single country on the planet, which is going to control every single citizen. They locked the entire planet down in 2020. None of this was possible without these industrial revolutions. So it's kind of like when you talk about the what you were bringing up. I feel like we're in the end game phase now. It seems.
It does seem that way. So you mentioned personally, because in Mexico, everybody needs to have the digital ID, and you've opted out of that, which good for you, standing for your conviction. What is that like? And do you think that that's going to be imminent for worldwide? Do you think there's going to be any resistance in any nations? And yeah.
So two separate topics, resistance, but then what it's like. And so I think, look, this is coming to every single country. Don't let anyone, there's people that call me black pilled. They've got, your hopium, your copium. It's like, well, what's your white, they tell me, what's your solution? I'm like, well, what's your solution? You're black pilled. I'm like, okay, well, give me your white pill. And it's like, what I try to do with my podcast, that have this cold sort of calculation, analysis of what is transpiring. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. Anything. I want to see things, reality as it is. And I'm sorry, it's not looking good. We had the whole COVID experience. I was living in Kazakhstan. It was worse than other countries where, we're living in this apartment building on the 9th floor. They issue us cards. Like in the US, did you get cards? They gave us a card, the government, to every person in Kazakhstan, and it said, you could only leave your house every other day, only one person with the card, and only to go to the supermarket, bank, or pharmacy. Meanwhile, it's super cold. My kids outgrew her shoes. She's got no shoes. It's like winter. I'm like, it's insane. Like they're caring for our health, but she's going to walk barefoot out at minus 30 degrees. I can't go to the clothing store because of COVID, but she's going to freeze to death now. But we care for your public health. Take the shot. And so they created, and then they had police patrols, 3 police walking around on foot, checking your papers, please. And then at night they had car patrols blaring the sirens, ushering us back into our homes. And we through Instagram we found a shoe seller that came to our apartment with bags of shoes to try on different sizes. I mean, it was so Kafkaesque. But they created the Ashuk app. It was integrated into your banking app in Kazakhstan. And then you couldn't go to. We escaped before this, but I heard later you couldn't go to coffee shops or malls without the app, which proved your biological purity, right? Whether you had the injection or whether you took the PCR test. Without that green light, you couldn't do anything. And so, long way of sort of answering your question, where back in 2020, one of my favorite interviews was with Edwin Black, the Jewish historian who wrote on IBM and the Holocaust. And what my favorite term is what he calls it. We are in this algorithm ghetto, like the Jewish physical ghetto in Germany. And now they're putting us in this digital algorithm ghetto, and it's happening worldwide. He says it's going to happen first in the more advanced countries, and then eventually come to the developing countries, and they're putting everything on the digital space. And it's going to have, we've never seen this in all of history. With a push of a button, they can unperson you. You become a non-entity, a zombie. And he said they don't have to send, like in the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany or fascist Italy, they don't have to send Gestapo to your door, if you're a dissenter. They just hit the button and you literally cannot buy food because your payment has been blocked, and you're just going to literally starve to death in a few weeks into your house unless you can forage for berries. Your neighbor's not going to help you because they will be thrown in the same algorithm ghetto. And so, like in 2021, I get taken off of Patreon. It's funny because that same week, it's a long backstory, but I did that interview with Francis Boyle that went viral. He's the author of the Bioweapons Act legislation. I was the first to get his take on COVID in January 2020. The next day, InfoWars picked it up. My face was in the front page of InfoWars. Alex Jones is doing a play-by-play of that interview. And then the Associated Press wanted to do a hit piece on me of July in 2020. I never responded to their inquiry. They were like, "Hey, we want to do a story on you and your interview with Francis Boyle and know who you are." And I just didn't respond. And then that article that was published the following in August 2020, it was a hit piece on conspiracy theorists, and didn't mention me because I didn't respond. And then that same author in April of 2021, March of 2021, did a hit piece on Boyle, and they mentioned Geopolitics and Empire. And that hit piece was co-written by Atlantic Council, NATO's think tank.
Wow.
And that same week when it came out, I was taken off of Patreon. So that shows you the links between the military, intelligence, Silicon Valley, big tech, banking, and financing. It's all interlinked. And then because Patreon told me you need to delete a few interviews from the entire internet, otherwise you can't get your account back on Patreon. And I'm like, screw you guys. I'm not bowing down to you. I'm not deleting. It was an interview with Robin Monotti and Dr. Mark Circus. And I'm like, and then they came back a second email. They're like, are you going to delete those interviews? And I'm like, did you not understand my first response? I'm not deleting them. Do you want me to delete my Patreon account? For you? I eventually, I was terminated and I deleted the account. And then in April of 2022, the Department of Homeland Security, you remember, opened the Disinformation Governance Board with Nina Yankowicz. So that same week,
wow.
Consortium News, Mince Press News, Caleb Maupin, and myself were banned from PayPal. It's clear it was the Department of Homeland Security. And so, all of this stuff is happening. People are being debanked. Everyone knows the story, Canada convoy and the Canadian convoy. And in many countries, it's happening now. People are being debanked in Brazil, Europe, China. And so in Mexico, what happened last November, my debit card expired. And all previous years, the previous years, I would always, with my passports, official government ID, right? Mm-hmm. Your passport in every country. So I would go with my US and Mexican passport and renew my debit card every time it expired. This time I went in last November, same deal. And they're like, "Oh, sorry, where's your Mexican voter ID card?" I'm like, "I don't have one. I became a citizen in 2018. And I'm like, I don't vote because it's all a sham. We live under world government now." And they can't renew it because now the only ID they will accept in Mexico is the Mexican voter ID, which is called INE. And I'm like, well, I opened my bank account as an American when I first came to Mexico, when I wasn't a Mexican citizen. Right. Can we renew it as an American? He's like, and the clerk was well-meaning. He was trying to help me. And he's like, okay, your US passport. Okay, now the system asks me for your Mexican visa because you're using your US passport as a foreigner. But I don't have a Mexican visa because I'm a Mexican national. It's so Kafkaesque. And so if you're a Mexican national, you need to use your Mexican voter ID card, which I don't have because I don't vote. Like, where's the logic? I don't vote. Why do I need the Mexican voter ID card? Right. But it turns out I discover it's the most complete INE. There it is. It's the most complete, the Mexican voter ID INE is the most complete identity document in Mexico. And I knew years ago, another reason I didn't want to get it was it was going to be, they were going to use that as the basis for the national digital ID. And in each country, it's different. In the U.S., driver's licenses are more ID. Common.
Yeah.
Right. Real ID. And so, but, in the U.S., we're used to just using your driver license as ID. In Mexico, they don't accept your driver's license as a form of ID. It's weird. And so they went with the INE. And that same week, it's funny, you know, Reclaim the Net, which is a great website which tracks the digital dictatorship. Reclaim the Net reported how in November last year, when I was doing this, the UN had their, remember, Summit for the Future, Pact for the Future meetings.
Yep, I remember.
And they said they want everyone in all countries to link their bank account to their digital ID. And here I was in Mexico where I couldn't. Now they want me to link my bank account to the Mexican voter ID, which is the Mexican digital ID. And it's going and it's also because it's a biometric. So I believe the Mexican government has told many institutions like banks, look, now the only ID that can be accepted is the Mexican voter ID. And so I've left it unrenewed, my debit card. I've got another bank account where I'm able to transfer the money still and cash out, but that card eventually is going to expire. And when I get to that,
is that one in Mexico too?
Yeah, it's also in Mexico. Okay. So once I get there, I might eventually have to capitulate and get the voter ID card. That's not my line in the sand. So I understand, you know, people have different lines in the sand.
Of course.
My line in the sand, I've said before, you know, the mark of the beast, when you talk about, it could be a physical implant. It doesn't need to be, because the principle of this idea of the mark of the beast is like the book of Daniel, when they tell him to bow down and worship, right? And they say, no, we're not going to do that. Throw us in the fire. We don't care. So mark of the beast, the real principle there, the lesson to take away is like, if you believe in Christ, you will die. You know, you're not going to, how would I say, you're going to keep your faith, right? Regardless if they torture you or, amenazar, I can't even think of the word in English now, threaten you to death, right? But then if they say, you know, bow down or accept this system or whatever to get food, you know, a lot of people will say, okay, I reject Christ, just feed me, right? That's the principle of the mark of the beast. So we could see a future where, you know, it talks about the right hand and the forehead, right?
Right.
Look at the future we're entering now with all that I just described, these digital IDs, digital currencies. You could enter shops, government offices, and it's facial recognition, right? You go to the airports now, TSA is facial recognition. You don't need a passport soon. You just, right. In Australia now, you just get off the plane and walk through. You don't show your passport because of the facial recognition. It's your forehead, right? And you got the Amazon Palm payments. So many shops now in China and increasingly in the US, you can pay with your right hand, your palm. But it's linked to your thought and spiritual beliefs. So if you commit a thought crime or have eventually a spiritual belief that they don't like, you can go and attempt the payment with your right hand or your forehead, and it'll say access denied, just like Edwin Black said in the algorithm Ghetto.
How are they doing that? How are they tying that to thoughts and?
No, because, you know, now you can pay with your palm. Right, on Amazon Palm payments and shops. You don't have to use your phone payment. Or you can pay with your face, right? Russian now, BRICS is going to save us. Yeah, right. No, sorry. Russian metros are rolling out these biometric face scanners and payment systems. And so my argument is that that's linked to your social profile, right? Like what happened to me with PayPal, you know? And so in a not too distant future, if I go to a shop and want to pay with my account that's linked to my Palm payments, it can be denied. You know, they'll say, sorry, it didn't pass, red payment declined because it's linked to your social credit profile. And just one more example, one of my banks in Mexico, you go into the app and now it has a carbon, it's calculating your carbon footprint, like for each individual client. So I go in and it literally says, here's your carbon footprint. And it's got categories for electricity, energy, food, gasoline. I use mostly cash, so it doesn't have much. And it actually says, can you upload your gas receipts so we can better calculate the carbon footprint? And so I think this is it's all gonna link together. So the bank app has your carbon footprint tracker, which is linked to your, you know, Amazon Palm payments or facial account with the account with the store. Right. And they'll be calculating your social credit. And then so if you buy like a steak this week, if you want to buy another steak, it'll say, well, you already bought, you know, $20 worth of steak. You've reached your carbon footprint limit. If you want to buy another $20 steak, you know, we're gonna charge you a $20 carbon tax, so it's going to cost, $40 for the steak.
Right.
And I think that's how they're going to price out the middle and lower class. The elite who have money, it's going to be relevant for them. They'll pay the carbon tax, whatever, and live normally. The Bill Gates will continue flying in his private jet, but I won't be able to buy that extra steak. I won't be able to fill up my gas tank a second time. I won't be able to buy a plane ticket to go visit my family. So,
Right. Well, isn't Al Gore already doing that? He justifies that he's doing so much for the planet because he has so many carbon credits. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
they can pay their way out of this, but we can't. And that's why I often repeat, it's neo-feudalism,
yeah.
neo-techno-feudalism. Get rid of the middle class.
Yeah.
Feudalism in the sense where there's just the rich and the poor. And that's what
And the
they're trying to.
serfs, right?
Yeah.
Because they need their serfs. So you told them that you don't vote because we're already under world government. So 2 questions. Firstly, what was their response to that? I'm just curious. And secondly, can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that? Do you think we're already under a world government? So how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't recall exactly. I basically said, like, I didn't have the voter card because I don't vote. Like,
Okay.
it's kind of like, why are you asking me as for my identity document, a voter ID card, if I don't vote? Like, I'm trying to renew my bank card. Why are you
Right.
asking me for my voter card? I'm not voting at the bank.
Right.
Like, it doesn't make, on their, from their stupid globalist logic, it's like, look, I'm just using it against them. Like, doesn't make any sense. I have my passport. It's an official government ID. And I even told the clerk, I mean, this is the thing that gets me. These NPCs, these lemmings, these zombies. He was a nice guy, but these are the people that, they thought they were free by Milton Mayer. I've got the book. He interviews in the 1950s. I'm sure you're familiar with that. A dozen just average Germans and how they went along with the fascism.
Sure.
And it's like this bank clerk in Mexico. Like, I'm telling him, like, look, I'm already banned from PayPal. And now they want me to unify my digital ID with the bank account. And then, soon they'll be able to debate me. And he's just looking at me like a deer in the headlights, like with this smile. It's like he doesn't get it. He doesn't want to get it.
Right.
Like it's. I think these people just want to clock in 9 to 5, get their paycheck, and go home, and they're too afraid,
Of course.
to think about these things. And
They're
so
dark.
the world got. Say that again.
They're dark things. So yeah, a lot of people would prefer, just stay in their bubble and pretend it's not happening.
And that goes to my complaint, cowardice, and I think we need to be courageous. We have to be courageous. And it's disgusting to think, in the Bible, people talk about how God looks down upon cowards. Like it's a sin to be a coward, and your forefathers, this is why history is important, including your personal family history. My grandpa was a prisoner for a time of the Croatian Nazi regime. My uncle fought in the war in Yugoslavia. He's still alive, and you look to your past for heroes, and that gives you juice to keep going forward. But I think with world government, I'll use the past example of the Mexican elections. They had the election, I think, last year. I didn't vote because I didn't have my Mexican voter ID card, and there were 3 political parties. Okay, you had the Claudia Sheinbaum. She's the current president, Morena party of López Obrador, AMLO. And then you had the coalition of the previous right-wing ruling parties, PAN and PRD. Xochitl, she was the representative, she was the candidate there. And then you had the Movimiento Ciudadano, the citizens movement, which was like the orange party.
Okay.
All 3 of those parties were full globalists. The current party of Sheinbaum, López Obrador, Morena, López Obrador, I can show you the mainstream articles where he did a tweet in 2016 where he was hanging out with Jeremy Corbyn, and López Obrador said, we're working towards a world government, a fraternal world government. And then he ad nauseum repeated, we need to copy the European Union and integrate Canada, USA, and Mexico. Full-on globalist, North American Union.
Yeah.
You get the second option, this coalition of parties, of these right-wing parties. Most of the presidents of those past right-wing parties were CIA agents. I interviewed Jefferson Morley, who wrote a book on it, Our Man in Mexico, and he declassified the documents which showed multiple CIA presidents, Mexican presidents, were actual CIA agents that had code names Litempo 5, Litempo 6, Litempo 7. And Xochitl has attended Davos. So it's like your second option, you're voting for CIA agents who also are down with the North American Union. And the third option, the orange option, some of the most prominent governors and politicians, one of them was the governor of my state in Mexico, Jalisco, Enrique, I'm ready, Alfaro, I'm forgetting his last name. I used to call him Adolfo Alfaro, referencing Hitler.
Oh.
When they locked down Jalisco during COVID, and I have everything documented in mainstream news sources. Some of the ideas they were floating, Alfaro, the governor of Jalisco, of the Orange Party, came out and said, there's the state, you have the federal Mexican Constitution, and you have the state constitution, right? Like in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just laugh. They call our state the motto, like many, the Lone Star State in Texas. Jalisco is the free and sovereign state of Jalisco. I just want to puke at this doublespeak.
Right.
You'd have to put on face masks to enter anywhere in Jalisco, to shops, government offices, vaccine certificates. He was floating the idea, we're thinking of changing the state constitution of the free and sovereign state of Jalisco because we can't force inject you, right? Because of the constitution. So we want to change the state constitution so we can force inject you. And that never happened. But the fact that they were talking about that, and then a second thing they were discussing was like
extremes freedom. We're going to force inject you. Yes, got it.
Yeah, so then they could obligate us to be injected. And then the other option was Soviet internal passports. They were discussing the idea of to enter the state of Jalisco. Like if you're coming from another Mexican state to enter Jalisco, you wouldn't be able to enter without a vaccine certificate. So like imagine I go to the beach in another state, Nayarit or something, and I try to return to Jalisco where my home is.
Right.
Oh, sorry, you can't get in because you don't have a vaccine certificate. But my home is in the state. Like how crazy. And this was the third option, and his partner, Samuel Garcia in Nuevo León, the state of Nuevo León, that's also ground zero for globalism in Mexico. This is the governor that said he wanted to fine and jail people who made fun of him on social media. That didn't pass.
Thank goodness.
That law he trained. And then he went to Davos. He met Klaus Schwab. He invited Schwab back to Nuevo León. He's made statements. He wants to get rid of all the cars in Nuevo León. Tesla's coming in there, all of the big companies. And so they're building smart homes, like pod smart, I'm not kidding, with Chinese companies in Nuevo León. And just furthermore, Mexico City has been declared a smart city. I live in a smart city in the state of Sonora. They just made a deal with Foxconn to make the capital, Hermosillo of Sonora, a smart city. And then once that is done, to do that to the other cities in Sonora. And so my point, I believe in every single country now, there's only one party. In the US, Republican, Democrat, it's one party. In Mexico, you got three options. It's one party. In any country, obviously in Russia, there's only one party. In China, there's only one party. Any European country, there you go. You guys, you're really quick to pull up all. I'm like, everything I'm telling you is mainstream news. There's no longer conspiracy forums. It's insane. And so I don't think it matters party politics anymore. And a number of my guests, like Justino Carero, who I referenced recently, there's no more horizontal conflicts, internally within nations, between parties, or nations between nations. We just have one vertical force, which is the transnational globalists, and us. We are the insurgents, is what Justino says. And I think that we're de facto in world government. And maybe some of your listeners won't like this, but I argue that Trump is, by hook or by crook, wittingly or unwittingly, advancing the New World Order agenda because he's promoting North American integration. And then recently, you got to step back and think about this. Even left or right analysts are realizing this. He's saying integrate Canada, USA, Greenland, Panama, and Mexico. That's the century-old Technate plan. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the Technocracy Technate plan, that's what the British elite also, the Cecil Rhodes Roundtable, that's also their plan. So these multiple groups have the same plan.
Yeah, their plan.
Club of Rome.
Adaptive globalization, yeah.
And then you get King Charles III saying, hey, join the Commonwealth. I'm like... And he's like, okay. And that was a specific plan of Clarence Strait in 1939, a union now, Atlantic Union, which would begin by joining UK, USA, and Canada and forming an Atlantic Union, which would be the basis for the British Commonwealth, the World Commonwealth world government. So it's kind of like
Oceania. Oceania.
Right, basically.
Yeah,
And so you unify Europe, which they have done now. They want to unify North America and then merge those into an Atlantic Union. And so where was I? I think my final and Trump, right? And so he's also the catalyst because of he's saying pull the US out of NATO.
Yeah.
That is catalyzing further European integration and their plan for an EU army. And now we just had South Korea, Japan, and China meet to further, for the first time in 5 years, to further regional integration and free trade. And the pretext for that is Trump's nationalistic tariffs. So if you think about it, Trump's actions are actually accelerating North American Union, European Union, and Asian integration. And again, we don't know how each person thinks in the administration. Mm-hmm. I think the people behind the scenes know what they're doing. And sometimes it can be game theory, right? And so they are forcing you, if you think of game theory, you only have a certain set of options. There's like 2 or 3 doors that you can go through, and they push you through that door, and you have no other option but to go through that. You've been pushed into that. And so,
right.
Yeah, I don't think, I think we're screwed. And there's no really political solution. I default to the solution is spiritual, right? Jesus. But that's not to say that we don't continue resisting, right? And continue acting as good stand-up citizens, fighting corruption, resisting evil wherever we can.
Yeah. Wow. It definitely does not paint a pretty picture. Not that I disagree. I do, I do have questions how much he's aware, like you said, wittingly or unwittingly. My thought is I don't really think he's in control, to be quite honest. And to be fair, the president's not supposed to be. He's not a dictator, right? So, but I think he has a lot less power than people. It's really funny because when, the argument, I get a lot of pushback. They're like, and for the people who push back at me, I always say, if you just listen to me for even 10 seconds, you probably wouldn't say that. So you've just made a blanket judgment on, some screenshot you saw or whatever. But they have like an impression of me being like a MAGA cheerleader. And, I'm like, you have a lot more faith actually in him if you think that he has that much control one way or the other. I'm like, I don't really see it that way. I mean, I unfortunately think that I'd like to think he's a good actor, but either way, I just don't think he has the type of control that people on either side. It's like the people who think he's the Antichrist or the people who think he's the savior. I'm like, I don't really think he's either. I'd like to hope that he is, a good faith actor that's trying to do some good. But either way, he's, one person and he's really being steered. And I think he's personally, I don't think, even if he were aware of the big plan, I don't think he's aware of everything. And I think by design, because it would behoove them, like the oligarchs, to use him and play to, his ego and his, the things that they, I always point out that like Mice to Rascals document. It's a CIA document that Mice is like money, ideology, coercion, and ego. And then they decided Rascals was a better acronym and a better plan for creating essentially change agents. It was for military leaders, or intelligence leaders, but essentially they're change agents. Either way, though, I mean, if you just think about Mice, like the money, ideology, coercion, ego, play to those things. I think that it's easier to get somebody who's going to, and especially with someone like Trump, I think he'll be more likely to acquiesce to your plans than if you were to, give him full disclosure, here's the plans, will you execute them for us? I don't think that's the smartest strategy. And they've been playing this game for quite a while. So I think they're pretty savvy.
I had a few thoughts. I mean, if someone put a gun to my head and I had to say, I mean, I would argue that Trump probably knows a lot of stuff because, I mean, I think you get into the more esoteric stuff and it feels like I wouldn't doubt he's probably like a Freemason and he's aware of a lot of these plans. But RFK, I mean, what happened this week is a case study. A lot of us I got his books during COVID. He was like hardcore radical. He was literally saying things as they were. that this is this totalitarianism. He gave those speeches in Berlin, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
And he was hardcore radical, just 1,000% pure brutal truth. And you're like, wow, this guy's amazing. On April 6th, he tweets out, many people maybe have seen now. Let me pull it up in my Telegram. My public Geopolitics and Empire Telegram's got 13,500 subscribers. And so I use that to share my news, but also as an archive, because it goes back years. You can type in search terms and it'll pull right up the article. Kennedy on April 6th says, the most effective way to prevent the spread of measles is the MMR vaccine. And it's like, whoa, this is a total 180 of what he's literally been saying the past decade of Children's Health Defense, which was founded, I think, around 2016.
It was originally the World Mercury Project.
Project. I actually looked at this week to find that history. So World Mercury Project. So he's been doing a decade, this work, saying, and I think there's clips people showed of him actually saying, I wouldn't give my kid MMR vaccine. And now he's here saying, it's the only, way. And then the next day, April 7th, Children's Health Defense publishes a video, and it's on their Twitter, X, saying, MMR vaccines are bad. So it's like, I'm thinking, how do you explain this? Is this like good cop, bad cop shtick where, RFK is now the bad cop, MMR vaccines are good, and CHD is kind of like, he's the founder of CHD. I think he's not with them anymore. Yeah. But they're like MMR vaccines are bad, and Kennedy's like, no, they're good, and it's kind of like, what's going on here? And I think this is often a cognitive dissonance trick that the elites use, where they do the good cop, bad cop routine.
Oh yeah, Hegelian dialectic. Yeah, I just wrote a book on it. I'm halfway through, but I just published a preview of it on my Substack, which is on the Hegelian dialectic. So I agree with you. I think that's absolutely a technique of the elite. I will say on RFK, just because I was pretty I know people who know him personally. I lived out in California, and so I was kind of in that circle, and I think it's a little bit misleading to say it's a 180. He was not completely anti-vaccine. He was mandating vaccines. He's always been warning about, the potential dangers of vaccines. But even for his own party, he required you to get the jab to enter his party back in 2021. And I know people will blame his wife for that, but it's still his house. And he was the Mr. supposedly anti-vax guy, right? And he's saying to enter my party, you have to have the jab. So most of his stance has really been around this idea that, yes, they cause harm. We need more research around it. We should not make it a requirement. I do think he has shifted, and I agree with you. I think there's a good cop, bad cop thing going on now. It does look that way to me. But I feel like people have a perception of it being like this, radically different position that he's taking now. And I don't know. I mean, I look through his history. He's never been completely against vaccines. He's been against mandating them. He's always said there needs to be more research around them. And he definitely has indicated that they cause harm. I mean, that he's been very clear on. So I don't know.
And I'll just add. So you're familiar with Richard Grove, Grand Theft World?
Sure. Yeah.
So this week, I think it was they did their, I think it was a Sunday, they do their show Sunday, like the 6-hour marathon podcast.
I think I'm on record as being their longest show ever. I co-hosted with Tony, and it was over 8 hours, or maybe just under 8 hours. Yeah, it was. I think I'm on record for their longest episode. But
so they had, I think, as I understand it, I don't follow it regularly, but I think Tony was replaced by Scott Armstrong of Rebunked News, who I've hung out with, and I've been interviewing him on both my old TNT and Geopolitics Empire, and Teese Snyder of Conspiracy Synergies. So Teese produced his second mini documentary on Geopolitics and Empire. It's on my YouTube intro. It's a 12-minute documentary about myself. He stayed on stayed with me for a week earlier this year because he was attending these Anarchapulco and People's Reset conferences here in Mexico. We were at People's Reset together, and so Teese was at the Third Eye Carnival. I
just saw him there. Yeah.
All right. So you saw him.
So I got to meet him in person. Yeah.
Right. So he guested on Grand Theft World, and they screened so I made it onto Grand Theft World. They screened my mini doc. But what was fascinating, after that, I watched the whole thing, and they screened separately this video from like the 70s. I'll put it in the Zoom chat.
Okay.
They screened this video, and it was Donald Pleasance, right, from Halloween. Remember Halloween, the horror films? Donald
Yes, yes.
Pleasance was like the good actor, and it was a TV show from like the 70s where Donald Pleasance. I'm like, it was mind-boggling to watch this episode. I urge everyone to go and watch it, and they screened this on Grand Theft World. My mind was blown. This
Okay.
was like 1960s or 70s, and it's a news station, and they're trying to. It's kind of related to what we're talking about with Trump and RFK,
Yeah.
where they're part of the global elite. Donald Pleasance, yeah, there it is. I forget the exact show. It's probably in the description, but they find someone who's working in the news industry who's really good at what they do, and they have like low morals, but they're very responsible, and they're trying to get them to join the club. And first they offer them blackmail. Yeah, 1968, Desmond Loudon, and they offer them first money,
Yep.
and power, and then when the person rejects that, they say basically, we're going to kill you if you don't join us. And that, they had inserted this chip into him that can blow up and kill him, and it shows how they manufacture. Yeah, that's it. That's the guy they're trying to blackmail, and he's forced to join ultimately. And they invent the news. For the next year, they just invent the news, and Donald Pleasance is on the hierarchy. He's like 2 floors above are the globalists, and they have this AI machine that they follow for their instructions, and it's very instructive. Like, maybe this is how it works with RFK or others. We're like, okay, first we got blackmail in case you want us to pull out that card. We'll give you status with a nice position and good pay. If you don't want that, your plane's going to crash, like economic hitman style. So, and that was done, the fact that was done in the 60s, it's like,
Oh,
whoa. I mean, it's,
yeah, I think that goes back millennia. I don't think that that's a new game.
No, I mean, I meant the fact that was that video was produced.
Yeah,
in
that
the
they were
60s,
saying that they were revealing
Right.
it back then. Yeah, no, that is pretty crazy. I'll have to watch that. They do great work. They do great historical analysis. Yeah, so I'll definitely check that out. So do you think that they've blackmailed RFK? Is that like the impression that you're getting?
I mean, I don't know. I do my weekly paid analysis for subscribers where I try to do 1 hour a week.
Right.
Richard does 6 to 7 hours. For my paid subs, I try to like bring everything, synthesize it into like an hour and 20 minutes.
Sure.
And what was I briefly shared the story of maybe you saw Jeffrey Epstein's victim, Virginia or something, said she was going to die on Instagram. And I didn't have much to say on that sort of thing because that hasn't been. I don't have enough bandwidth, right, to cover everything. None of us do.
I get it.
And as I already said, I'm interested more in the biblical view, world government, the algorithm ghetto. Other people have other focuses, some geopolitical. Denny Rancor, who I've had on the podcast, he just made a tweet and said, who are your favorite geopolitical analysts? And he mentioned a few of them, some that I've interviewed. And I couldn't say they're my favorite because some of these guys talk only about geopolitics and Russia, the minutia of Ukraine and Russia, and they don't talk about globalism at all. I'm like, you guys are missing half the picture.